The silent expanse of space surrounding Earth's orbit was pierced by the sudden blare of alarms throughout the Aegis station. Colonel Helena Voss strode purposefully through the corridors of the military outpost, her footsteps echoing against the metal flooring. Personnel scrambled around her, but she maintained her composure, a trait that had earned her the position of Commander of Space Intelligence. "Status report," she demanded as she entered the command center. "Long-range sensors have detected something massive approaching the outer rim of our solar system." "Colonel," replied Captain Zara Quinn, her technical advisor. The young officer's fingers flew across the holographic interface, bringing up a three-dimensional projection of their solar system. The year was 2437. Humanity had united under the Solar System Alliance after centuries of conflict, establishing the Aegis geostationary military station, orbiting Earth as its primary defense headquarters. Interplanetary colonies flourished on Mars, Europa, and Titan. It was an era of unprecedented prosperity and technological advancement for mankind. "Enlarge Quadrant 7, Voss ordered, her steely gray eyes narrowing as the projection zoomed in on the disturbance. The image crystallized to reveal a fleet of spacecraft, unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Massive vessels with angular, predatory designs that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Their formation was precise, military in nature, and unmistakably alien. "How many?" Voss asked, her voice betraying no emotion. "Initial count shows approximately 2,500 warships." "Colonel, the smallest of them dwarfs our largest battlecruiser," Quinn responded, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. Voss's communicator chimed. "The Security Council is assembling for an emergency session. Colonel, President Lee requests your immediate presence." Within 30 minutes, Helena Voss stood before the Solar System Alliance Security Council, presenting the grim intelligence to President Marcus Lee and his cabinet. The council chamber, with its panoramic view of Earth below, had never felt so tense. "These vessels bear markings consistent with the Zephyrian Empire," Voss explained, projecting the images onto the chamber's central display. "An interstellar civilization we've only heard rumors of from deep space transmissions intercepted by our outermost probes." "And their intentions?" President Lee asked, his usually confident demeanor showing cracks of concern. As if in answer, every communication system in the chamber simultaneously activated. Screens flickered to life, displaying the image of a humanoid figure with iridescent skin that shifted between deep purples and blues. Its eyes, entirely black, without discernible pupils, stared unblinkingly from the screens. "People of Earth," the figure spoke, its voice unnaturally smooth, yet tinged with mechanical precision. "I am Emperor Vorak of the Zephyrian Dominion. Your primitive civilization has been granted the honor of joining our galactic order. You will submit to Zephyrian rule within 72 Earth hours, or face complete annihilation. Resistance is not only futile, it is illogical." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. President Marcus Lee, a former diplomat who had risen to leadership through his ability to forge consensus during Earth's unification period, stood slowly. "It seems, ladies and gentlemen, that humanity faces its greatest challenge." The following hours devolved into heated debate. General Reinhardt, a veteran of the Mars independence conflicts and head of the Alliance Military Command, argued forcefully for immediate surrender. "We have no defense against a force of this magnitude," he insisted, pounding his fist on the polished table. "The preservation of human life must be our primary concern." Others, including Voss, advocated for resistance. "Submission now only guarantees slavery later," she countered. "If we surrender without a fight, we abandon everything our civilization stands for." As the debate raged, Colonel Voss excused herself to return to her Intelligence Operations Center on Aegis Station. There, she immersed herself in analyzing every scrap of information they had about the Zephyrians. Deep in the classified archives, She discovered a fragmentary transmission intercepted 5 years earlier from a distant system that had apparently fallen to the Zephyrians. The message, sent by resistance fighters, contained crucial information. The Zephyrian fleet relied on a centralized AI routing system. If compromised, their entire command structure could potentially collapse. When she brought this information back to the Council, the atmosphere shifted. President Lee, who had been listening silently to both sides, finally spoke. "We cannot simply bow our heads to tyranny," he said quietly. "Throughout human history, freedom has never been freely given. It has always been fiercely protected. I will not be remembered as the leader who surrendered humanity without exhausting every possible means of resistance." He turned to Colonel Voss. "You have 48 hours to develop a strategy based on this intelligence. In the meantime, we will prepare civilian shelters and evacuation protocols, and establish communication with these resistance fighters if possible." The following day brought a critical discovery. Captain Quinn, working with a team of the Alliance's best cyber specialists, found that the Zephyrian AI system had a vulnerability. It required periodic synchronization through a central node within their command ship. If we could introduce a disruptive code sequence during synchronization, a steel virus as we're calling it, we could potentially cripple their entire fleet's navigation and weapon systems, Quinn explained to Voss. Meanwhile, President Lee made a bold decision. Using encrypted quantum channels, he reached out to Altar, the leader of the resistance movement that had formed in systems already conquered by the Zephyrians. To everyone's surprise, Altar responded immediately. The alien resistance leader's holographic form materialized in the secure communications chamber. Tall and slender with 4 arms and copper-toned skin covered in intricate patterns. Altar regarded the human delegation with large, compound eyes. "The Zephyrians destroyed my homeworld when we refused submission," Altar stated, without preamble. "We have been fighting from the shadows ever since. If Earth stands against them openly, we will contribute our forces to your cause." With this alliance forged, a daring plan took shape: Operation Pendulum. A diversionary force would draw a portion of the Zephyrian fleet to the outer reaches of the solar system, while a small, elite team, led by Colonel Voss, would infiltrate their command structure to deploy the steel virus. As preparations intensified, both President Lee and Colonel Voss underwent profound personal transformations. Lee, once hesitant and deliberative, embraced decisiveness, making difficult calls that might cost lives but could save humanity. Voss, accustomed to relying solely on her own judgment, learned to place trust in allies, both human and alien. Not everyone supported the resistance plan. General Reinhardt continued to advocate for surrender, creating division within the military ranks. Civilian populations across Earth and the colonies were similarly split, with protests both for peace and for defiance erupting in major cities. "You're leading us to extinction," Reinhardt accused during a particularly heated strategic session. "And you would lead us to subjugation," Voss countered, standing toe-to-toe with the much larger man. "History doesn't remember those who surrender their values at the first sign of danger. General." With less than 24 hours remaining before the Zephyrian deadline, President Lee addressed the unified people of Earth and its colonies. His speech was broadcast throughout the solar system. "Citizens of the Solar System Alliance, tomorrow we face an ultimatum from a power that seeks not our cooperation, but our complete submission. Throughout human history, we have faced seemingly insurmountable challenges, and we have prevailed through courage, innovation, and unity. I cannot promise that our path forward will be without sacrifice, but I can promise that as long as I draw breath, humanity will stand for freedom, not just for ourselves, but for all sentient beings who yearn to determine their own destiny. Tonight, prepare your families and follow evacuation protocols where directed. Tomorrow, we show the galaxy what it means to be human." The response was overwhelming. Volunteers flooded military recruitment centers. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock refining the steel virus. Civilian ships offered themselves as transports and even potential combat vessels. As the deadline approached, Operation Pendulum commenced. The diversionary fleet, commanded by Alliance Admiral Santos and supplemented by Altar's resistance forces, engaged the outer contingent of the Zephyrian Armada near Neptune's orbit. The battle was spectacular and terrifying. Antimatter weapons and gravity distortion fields deployed against human plasma cannons and kinetic railguns. Meanwhile, Colonel Voss led a stealth team aboard the Nightshade, a prototype reconnaissance vessel with experimental cloaking technology. Their mission: approach the Zephyrian command ship undetected and transmit the steel virus during the fleet's next synchronization cycle. The Nightshade slipped through the chaos of battle, using the debris field created by the conflict as additional cover. As they approached the massive Zephyrian command vessel, easily the size of a small moon, Captain Quinn prepared the virus for deployment. "Synchronization cycle beginning in 3 minutes," she reported, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her console. "Virus package ready for transmission." Colonel Voss nodded. Her attention split between Quinn's preparations and the tactical display showing the battle raging around Neptune. Admiral Santos was holding his own, but the superior firepower of the Zephyrian fleet was beginning to tell. They needed to succeed, and quickly. "Initiating transmission," Quinn announced, activating the sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then alarms blared throughout the Nightshade. "They've detected the intrusion!" Quinn shouted above the noise. "The Zephyrians have isolated the affected sector and are locking down their systems." "Can the virus still spread?" Voss demanded. "Not without direct access to their central routing hub," Quinn replied grimly. "We need to physically connect to their mainframe." Voss made an instant decision. "Prepare a boarding team. We're going in." Using the Nightshade's still-functioning cloaking system, they approached a maintenance dock on the massive command ship. Voss led a team of 6 specialists, including Captain Quinn, equipped with pressure suits designed to function in hostile environments. They breached the hull successfully, but within minutes of entry, Zephyrian security forces detected their presence. As Quinn worked desperately to find a terminal that could access the central AI hub, Voss and the others engaged in a firefight with the alien defenders. "I need 3 more minutes," Quinn called out, as she interfaced her equipment with the Zephyrian console. "You have 2, Voss replied, firing her pulse rifle at an approaching security drone. When Quinn finally uploaded the virus, nothing seemed to happen initially. Then, as they fought their way back to their entry point, the artificial gravity began to fluctuate. Emergency lights flickered on and off. "It's working," Quinn confirmed, checking her handheld scanner. "The virus is spreading through their systems, but too slowly. They're already implementing countermeasures." As they reached the Nightshade and disengaged from the command ship, Voss made another critical decision. "Set course for the asteroid belt," she ordered. "We need to buy time for the virus to fully deploy." What followed was a desperate chase through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The Nightshade, smaller and more maneuverable, used the dense field of space rocks as cover, while several Zephyrian pursuit craft followed, their weapons creating spectacular explosions as they pulverized asteroids in their path. Meanwhile, President Lee monitored both situations from the Aegis Command Center. The diversionary battle near Neptune was turning into a slaughter as Admiral Santos's forces were gradually overwhelmed. The Nightshade was reporting successful virus deployment, but insufficient spread rate. Lee faced the most difficult decision of his life. The Zephyrian deadline had passed, and their main fleet was now advancing toward Earth. Civilian evacuations were still underway, with millions of people crowding onto transports, bound for underground shelters on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. "Sir," his military aide reported, "the Zephyrian main fleet will be in firing range of Earth in 30 minutes. Lee closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. When he opened them, his resolve was clear. Order Admiral Santos to disengage and regroup at the Orion Cloud position. Then contact Colonel Voss. When Voss's face appeared on the communication screen, streaked with sweat and blood from a cut above her eye, Lee didn't waste time. Colonel, we're implementing Phase 2. Can your team reach the Orion Cloud rendezvous point? Yes, sir, she replied without hesitation. But the virus hasn't fully propagated. The Zephyrians still have partial fleet control. It will have to be enough, Lee said grimly. We're committing all remaining forces to the Orion engagement. The Orion Cloud, a dense cluster of asteroids and dwarf planets near the route to Aegis Station, had been selected as the fallback position for Operation Pendulum. As the Nightshade limped toward the rendezvous point, pursued by Zephyrian vessels, Voss wondered if she would find any Allied forces still intact. To her amazement, she emerged from the asteroid belt to find not only Admiral Santos's battered but still operational fleet, but also dozens of civilian vessels retrofitted with makeshift weapon systems, and a substantial contingent of Altar's resistance ships. As the Zephyrian main fleet approached Earth, Emperor Vorak transmitted another message. Your resistance is as futile as it is disappointing. You have chosen extinction. In response, President Lee ordered all forces to pull back from Earth's immediate vicinity, making it appear as though they were abandoning the planet. The Zephyrian fleet, detecting this withdrawal, advanced confidently toward the seemingly defenseless world. What they didn't realize was that this was exactly what humanity wanted. As the majority of their fleet concentrated near Earth, the combined forces of the Solar System Alliance and the alien resistance launched their attack from the Orion Cloud. High-velocity ships, some piloted by volunteers on one-way missions, slammed into key vessels of the Zephyrian fleet, creating chaos in their formation. Simultaneously, the steel virus, which had been slowly spreading despite Zephyrian countermeasures, reached a critical mass. Throughout the enemy fleet, navigation systems failed, weapon targeting became erratic, communication between vessels broke down. Some ships began firing on their own allies in the confusion. From the command center on Aegis, President Lee personally gave the order to fire the Alliance's experimental gravitational displacement weapon, a device that could briefly, but catastrophically, alter the space-time continuum in a localized area. The weapon, mounted on a sacrificial vessel, detonated in the heart of the disoriented Zephyrian fleet. The resulting implosion created a temporary micro-singularity that dragged dozens of the largest Zephyrian ships into its crushing embrace before collapsing in on itself. The remaining enemy vessels, now operating without centralized control, found themselves under attack from all sides as the combined human and resistance forces pressed their advantage. Aboard the Nightshade, Colonel Voss watched the battle unfold with a mixture of hope and grief. 2 members of her boarding team had been killed during their escape from the Zephyrian command ship. Captain Quinn was severely injured, working through her pain to monitor the virus's spread through enemy systems. We're losing contact with the Emperor's vessel, Quinn reported, her voice weak but triumphant. The steel virus has reached their central command node. In a desperate last gambit, the Zephyrian command ship attempted to launch a direct assault on Earth, breaking away from the main battle with a small escort of vessels still under control. President Lee faced another impossible choice: commit forces to pursue the command ship, or continue pressing the advantage against the main fleet. Both, he decided, dividing their remaining forces. Colonel Voss, your team has the most experience with their systems. Intercept the command ship. The Nightshade, despite its battle damage, was still the fastest vessel in the Alliance fleet. With Captain Quinn guiding them through the Zephyrian systems she had accessed during their boarding action, they managed to predict the command ship's trajectory and intercept it just as it entered Earth's upper atmosphere. What followed was a desperate space battle visible to millions of humans looking up from the planet below. The Nightshade, joined by several resistance vessels and alliance fighters, engaged the Zephyrian command ship and its escorts. Weapons fire lit up the night sky like artificial auroras as the vessels maneuvered at speeds that defied conventional physics. In the chaos, Voss identified a critical weakness. The command ship's main propulsion system was fluctuating due to the virus's effects. "Target all weapons on coordinates I'm transmitting now," she ordered the Allied vessels. The concentrated fire on the precisely calculated weak point created a cascading failure throughout the massive vessel. As systems collapsed, the command ship began to break apart, its debris burning up harmlessly in Earth's atmosphere, like a meteor shower. In the wider battle at the Orion Cloud position, the remaining Zephyrian forces, witnessing the destruction of their command ship and Emperor, began to retreat. Some vessels surrendered outright, particularly those crewed by species that had been subjugated by the Zephyrians and forced into service. The victory, while decisive, came at a tremendous cost. Nearly half of the Alliance fleet was destroyed. Thousands of volunteer civilian vessels were lost. Colonel Voss's own Nightshade barely maintained life support as it limped back to Aegis Station. As she helped the injured Captain Quinn to the medical bay, Voss received a transmission from President Lee. "Colonel, reports are coming in from across the galaxy," he said, his face showing exhaustion but also wonder. "The Zephyrian Empire is collapsing. Subjugated worlds are rising up against their remaining forces. What we've done here today has sparked a revolution." 3 months after the Battle of Earth, as it came to be known, representatives from dozens of formerly oppressed civilizations gathered on Aegis Station for the founding of the Galactic Freedom League. President Marcus Lee, now bearing the physical toll of the crisis in his prematurely grayed hair and lined face, addressed the assembly. "We did not fight to conquer. We did not fight for glory or power. We fought because freedom is the birthright of all sentient beings, and there are some principles worth any sacrifice to defend. Today, we extend our hand in friendship to all civilizations who share this belief. Together, we will build a galaxy where no empire can ever again threaten the liberty of its inhabitants." Colonel Helena Voss, standing at attention behind the president, surveyed the diverse assembly of beings. She had changed profoundly through the crucible of conflict, learning to trust, to delegate, to value connection as much as duty. The loss of comrades weighed heavily on her, but so did the responsibility of their legacy. Captain Zara Quinn, still recovering from her injuries but insistent on attending the ceremony, leaned over to whisper, "Was it worth it, Colonel?" Voss watched as former enemies became allies, as beings who had never seen each other's worlds pledged mutual protection and respect. "Yes," she replied softly. "This is what we fought for." As for Emperor Vorak, justice came in a form few had anticipated. The fallen tyrant, rescued from his disintegrating vessel by a resistance team specifically tasked with capturing him alive, faced judgment from the civilizations he had oppressed. The tribunal sentenced him to exile in an artificial black hole prison, a containment field that utilized controlled gravitational distortion to create a pocket dimension from which there was no escape. In the years that followed, Earth emerged as a respected voice in galactic affairs, not because of superior firepower or technological advancement, but because of the moral courage humanity had demonstrated when faced with overwhelming odds. The Solar System Alliance expanded its reach, establishing diplomatic relations with civilizations from across the galaxy. Colonel Voss eventually accepted promotion to general, taking command of the Galactic Freedom League's combined defense forces. Under her leadership, the military shifted its focus from warfare to peacekeeping and humanitarian missions across formerly Zephyrian territory. President Lee served out his term and declined to run again, choosing instead to become Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. His diplomatic skills proved as valuable in peace as they had been during war. Captain Quinn, fully recovered and recognized across the galaxy for her role in developing the steel virus, dedicated herself to ensuring such technology could never be turned against free civilizations. Her work led to the creation of the Quantum Ethics Commission, which established principles for the responsible development of artificial intelligence across member worlds. Altar returned to his homeworld to lead its reconstruction, but maintained close ties with Earth. The alliance forged in desperation became a model for interspecies cooperation throughout the galaxy. On the 5th anniversary of the Battle of Earth, a memorial was unveiled in orbit where the final confrontation had taken place. It took the form of a simple sphere of reflective material that showed distorted images of Earth below and the stars above, representing how one small world had changed the course of galactic history. During the ceremony, General Voss stood beside the aging President Lee as he delivered what would become his most famous address. Freedom is not the natural state of the universe. Entropy, disorder, and tyranny seem to arise without effort. Liberty, justice, and cooperation require constant vigilance and renewal. 5 years ago, humanity faced a choice between submission and probable destruction. We chose to stand for something greater than mere survival. Today, as we look out at a galaxy more free than it has been in millennia, we remember that this freedom was purchased with sacrifice. We honor those who gave everything so that countless beings they would never meet could live in liberty. And we recommit ourselves to the principle that guided us through our darkest hour, that the measure of a civilization is not its power, but its compassion, not its conquests, but its contributions, not its ability to dominate, but its willingness to defend the defenseless. As twilight fell over Earth that evening, General Voss found herself alone at the observation deck of Aegis Station. The planet below glowed blue and green in the darkness, still miraculous in its beauty, despite all the turmoil it had endured. A familiar voice interrupted her contemplation. "Thinking about them?" Captain Quinn asked, joining her at the viewport. Voss nodded, knowing Quinn understood she was remembering those lost in the struggle. They never saw what they helped create. But they knew what they were fighting for, Quinn replied. Sometimes that has to be enough. As they stood in companionable silence, a transmission arrived from the long-range monitoring post at the edge of the solar system. A new civilization had made contact, requesting permission to send representatives to Earth. They had heard of the world that had broken the Zephyrian Empire and wished to learn from its people. Voss smiled faintly as she authorized the diplomatic protocols. Humanity's new chapter in the galaxy was just beginning, and she felt, for the first time in years, a sense of genuine hope for the future. The stars, once a realm of unknown threats, now represented unlimited possibility. "Ready for another adventure, Captain?" she asked. Quinn's answering grin was all the response she needed. Together. They turned toward the command center to prepare Earth for its next step into a wider universe, not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals in a community of free worlds. The galaxy would never be the same again, and that was exactly as it should be.